Well, the Americans must think in the past 1.5 years in which they have put up extreme sanctions against Iran. What have they accomplished? What they're doing against Iran is to the detriment of America and to the detriment of countries that seek to enter into economic activities with Iran. In addition to the fact that the type of sanctions executed by the United States against the people of Iran is an economic form of terrorism, particularly because women, children, the ill, those in need of medication are most severely hit. And I am here to say today that this cannot continue.
Let's bring in Kamran Bokhari, founding director for the Center of Global Policy. Kamran, before we address what Rouhani said there in that interview, the Pentagon announced today that the United States will send 2,000 troops and Patriot missiles to Saudi Arabia. Now, to what extent has protecting Saudi Arabia has become a priority to the United States in the effort to counter Iran in the aftermath of that oil facilities attack?
Well, I mean, the attack was unprecedented. It was a game changer. So I'm not surprised the United States is beefing up its forces in the kingdom to protect it from further Iranian attacks. The fact that we've not had a response, a military response to the brazen Iranian attack on the Saudi oil fields is only emboldening Tehran further. So this move to bring in 2,000 troops and other military hardware is in preparation to make sure that the Iranians don't come up with a follow-on attack.
All right, so you said that there hasn't been a response to it, but you do now have the U.S., the U.K., Germany, France, all agreeing now at this point that Iran was in fact behind the attack on the Saudi oil facilities. And the Saudis now say, while they do want to avoid war, that there will be a response and a military option is on the table. So the question is that something that the Saudis would go at alone? Would they rely on the U.S. support, given that there is all this hardware and extra personnel coming into the region? And what kind of response do you think that would elicit from Iran?
In my opinion, the United States would do it itself, because if the Saudis are asked to do it, or if they want to do it, or if they decide to do this, then there are two problems. The one, we don't know the effectiveness of the Saudi capabilities. They've never engaged in this kind of activity before, where they had to respond to a hostile state actor, in this case Iran, before, so we don't know whether it will be effective or not. Secondly, the Iranians are likely to take more liberty in terms of a response. It will be far more larger in scale, a counter-response from the Iranians to Saudi Arabia. In order to avoid both problems, I think the United States will do it itself. But I think that the timing will be interesting, because after the whole talk about there's going to be a retaliation, Iran is responsible. We haven't seen the attack just yet. All we've seen is a talk of an attack. So I think that they're giving negotiations a chance, especially with the French president trying to mediate and other actors as well. But I think that if this doesn't go through, then the United States will engage in some form of limited military response to up the pressure.
Well, but President Macron of France, his efforts have failed. We haven't seen such encounter between U.S. and Iranian officials on the sidelines of the UNGA. Iran's President Hassan Rouhani, he says that the precondition for such potential talks is to lift the sanctions on Iran. If you were to advise to President Trump, Cameron, would you tell him he should consider it, just maybe in order to get some face-to-face time with the Iranian president to bring them to the table?
I think that the fact that the Iranian president is saying that, hey, we're ready to talk if you lift some sanctions, that to me indicates that the Iranians want something as a gesture to come to the table, because that will allow them to avoid looking like they've caved in to maximum pressure. They've already struck, so their position going into these talks is relatively strong. The United States is probably countering and saying, look, you've already struck on the Saudi oil facilities, despite what you're saying in public. I'm referring to back channels here. And so I think in those back channels, the Iranians are still playing hardball because they think they have the advantage here. It's kind of similar to how the Taliban are treating American negotiators. So I think that, and unfortunately, it may come to it that the Americans would have to do the counterstrike in order to get the Iranians to say, okay, we're ready to talk now.
All right, Kamran Bokhari, we thank you so much for your time. Question is that if the U.S. would even lighten up on sanctions even a hair, would that be a sign of weakness to Iran as well?